Let's move on to our next caller. I'm going to go in order of wait time. So we got Wes, him from Georgia. Wes is a theist, and Wes would like to talk to Paul about the minimal witnesses idea.
Oh,
Hey,
exciting.
Wes, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, Wes.
Pretty good.
I
So,
really appreciate your video. Did I lose you?
Nope, we
nope,
got
go
you.
ahead.
Okay. I really appreciate your videos. I've and Paul, have been watching a lot of yours lately. The minimal witnesses is very interesting. I have never heard you deal with Paul's claims of apostleship and other apostles. I was wondering how you dealt with that because it seems like you're being very kind to the when you say
Mm,
things like they were just mistaken, they were just sincerely mistaken. It's, by the way, one of the most like Canadian arguments. It's very
possibly.
friendly, and I, as a
Wes, let
theist,
me just.
can.
Oh, yeah, Wes. I was just gonna just because just so that I can catch up the audience as quickly as I can. Minimal witnesses hypothesis is something that I put forth as how I think as something that I think explains all the data we have about the origin of Christianity, but without any miracles. And so the minimal witness parts comes from I will grant that Peter was a had a hallucination of Jesus, and it was the originator of Christianity. And later on, Paul also had a vision of some sort and helped the cause. And that really those are the only two witnesses that we have solid evidence for. And I think the two of them is sufficient to have kicked this whole thing off like dominoes. So that's like a super condensed version. It takes me normally like half an hour to explain it all. But Wes, that's kind of how you understand it as well, right?
Yes, definitely, and
Okay.
it
And
almost
so
comes
I
off like
go ahead,
go ahead.
please go. I just don't understand your
um
question
it, it
about apostles. So
Yeah. So I'll give you the. I can give you the question here. Do
okay.
you think that there was a kind of like a early conspiracy amongst Paul and the churches? Like, because do you think that Paul sincerely, do you think that he was kind of lying about what was happening around the early churches in his epistles?
So I don't. I think that the seven legitimate, undisputed epistles of Paul are, and people have been wearing. Derek from Myth Vision today was calling me up. We're trying to wear me down on this, but I do think that we can charitably say that everything that Paul wrote in those letters, he meant, and I feel like it takes nothing away from my hypothesis to grant that everything in those letters was sincere. And so now you talk about the word apostle, where I jump in is that the word apostle started out being used as synonymous with the 12 disciples, but very quickly, even in the book of Acts, already we were starting to call Stephen an apostle and Paul an apostle and Barnabas an apostle. Like we started just giving the word. And in fact, the early church fathers even defined the word as those who were sent out. So it no longer, it very quickly stopped meaning eyewitness and was just applied generally to anyone who was a missionary, essentially. So I don't know if
Okay,
that
so I
feeds
think
into
that's
your.
where. Yeah, I think that's where I wanted to kind of come at odds with you here a little bit. In
Okay.
Acts 1, it gives us the definition, the standard definition of the apostle, of what an apostle is, and part of the requirements is that they are a witness to the resurrection.
So I'm going to pull that up. I want to slightly disagree with you. I think. Well, let me be sure. It does not matter if that was the case in Acts 1, because very quickly in Acts, Barnabas, Stephen, Paul, people who don't meet the criteria of Peter, John, James, Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon Zealot, and Judas, son of James, who are in Acts 1:14, I think, is the list, something around that. And Matthias is replaced. And the criteria they gave for Matthias to replace Judas was that he had to have been with them the whole time and have seen the Lord, right? So it does not matter if
Right.
that was the definition in Acts 1, because you will agree with me that in the church fathers' writings and even in Acts itself, Barnabas becomes an apostle, Paul becomes an apostle, Stephen becomes an apostle. and there are several other people who are given the title apostle who don't meet that criteria, right? So the church watered down that term pretty quickly.
Well, I would kind of push back on that and say, how do you know that the opposite of that is not happening?
Explain.
These other people are also claiming to be witnesses of the resurrection and thus meeting the criteria for an apostle.
If that is the case, they are not
There were
explicitly
claimed
said.
to be 500 people, right, that had seen it. And do you think it's not reasonable for Paul to say, this person that I know, they have made a personal claim? So, over in Romans, Paul names several apostles, other apostles besides Barnabas, the ones that you mentioned there. And so when Paul says that, he is making the statement that I know this person and I know that they are an apostle. And in saying that, he's saying this is one of the witnesses of the resurrection.
That's going. I don't buy that, and I've not heard other scholars give me that feedback either. So I'm not. So that's not impossible, but that is entirely in the category of, like, you would agree that that's just a possibility. That's a possible interpretation of what's happening, right? Like the book
Sure.
doesn't.
So let's go to one more
it.
place. No, let's go to one more place. I agree. I agree with you. I can't say that it demands it. I think it could go either the way that I'm reading it or the way that you're reading it. But let me give you one more place that pushes this even further. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And you do believe that 2 Corinthians was written by Paul. I mean, you follow Ehrman's.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 Corinthians 12:12 says, truly the signs of an apostle were wrought among you. So he's showing him signs and wonders. So Paul writes this letter and he claims to have done signs and wonders in front of the Corinthians. So that's why I'm saying, do you believe Paul was lying about or there was some type of conspiracy to conjure up miracles that were not happening? Or do you believe that not only was Paul mistaken about his vision, but he was mistaken in watching people's miracles as well? So what he's claiming here, what I'm saying that he's claiming here is not only that he had signs, but also that in order for an apostle to be an apostle, they should have signs of an apostle, because, he said there are many false apostles and you need to try the apostles and, try these things to see if they're false apostles.
But in 2 Corinthians,
try them by signs and wonders.
Tell me what the signs and so it doesn't use the word miracles, right? It's signs and wonders. What were the signs and wonders?
Signs and wonders and mighty deeds.
Yeah. So is it speaking in tongues, which was one of the things Paul was, always pitching? Was it like you are going far beyond what I would go and say that these were unexplainable miracles? We're also very far away now from whether apostle means eyewitness.
Tongues were tongues were a very a very credible miracle.
Well, you and I will have to disagree on the word credible.
Yeah. We have, so I'm just going to jump in on that. We have many people today, former Christians, who are now atheists, and they could still jump back into their speaking in tongues mode and say all kinds of stuff that sounds like speaking in tongues, that convinced many other people before they were speaking in tongues, but now they no longer believe they're speaking in tongues. It's just a learned skill in speaking gibberish fluently.
That's a very different type of, that's a very perverted type of speaking in tongues. In the Bible,
how so?
In the book of Acts, when they spoke in tongues, it doesn't say that we heard people speak in other tongues.
No, but hold on. No, Wes, not from Acts, because we don't consider Acts to be reliable. So give it to me from the books that I talked about being reliable.
Okay. 1 Corinthians chapter 12.
Yeah,
says,
but
in verse number 10, that there are divers kinds of tongues, and then the interpretation of tongues, and that if someone speaks in tongues, then someone else has to interpret.
Right.
And so what they're doing is they're hearing. I have witnessed
that 100 times. But no. Someone interpreting does not mean that it's a coherent language that others people can speak.
I
because
understand.
Because interpretation, you would agree that interpretation is a spiritual gift as well, right? Others must interpret. So I've seen tongues, people speaking in tongues, and it's never a language that if you recorded it, you could put through Google Translate, right? It's always something else.
Right. So you're saying you would confine tongues only to be a this kind of trickable thing. You don't want to talk about in the book of Acts. I mean, while you're kind of throwing that away. In Acts, it was not. It did not start as these people are speaking in a tongue that no one knows, and then someone else is interpreting it because no one knows it.
I think that was added later because of I think that's a polemic to the objection I just gave.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. So I'll concede
now
on that.
Okay.
We still have
we've strayed
wonders
from
and mighty deeds as well there.
Right, but you would admit that is strayed very far from whether an apostle by definition has to have been someone who witnessed resurrected Jesus, right? Because now all that you're saying is that people did miracles, and Jesus promised that if people later would have faith, they would be able to tell the mountains to jump into the sea, and it would, right? Like that. Jesus was definitely predicting, as portrayed in the Gospels, Jesus was predicted as saying that future generations would be able to do miracles in his name. So miracle working is not any kind of guarantor about whether they saw resurrected Jesus, right?
Right. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that not everybody was called an apostle just because they wanted to be called an apostle. There were early requirements.
No, it was because they were sent out. And like if you read Clement and if you read Polycarp, like they started using apostle to mean what we call missionaries.
Right. But they were testing whether or not they were a true apostle by these. Right, but they were trying them. They were testing. The test was not
right, but that does.
Were you sent by someone? The test was. I mean, you see the tests written in the text.
Right,
here.
But the test was not, did they see resurrected Jesus? These are you're telling on yourself here. You're admitting that the test changed.
I don't see any. First of all, I disagree on the authorship of Luke, of course, but I'm giving you that point because that's a that's a disagreement between us, and I'm trying not to get hung up on a disagreement. I mean,
no, that's fair. But even if I'm granting, even in the Book of Acts, though, the use of apostle changes, and to be consistent with what the early church father did, and that is that it's a term of an approved missionary.
Okay. That makes sense. No, I appreciate that. I think that there's something. I think that there's something more there. I see something more than just Paul saying these people were approved. There's nothing more than that these people are approved by by such and such. He's giving tests. He's saying that he had passed certain tests. So I think that there's something more than just were they sent or not. But I can see where that wouldn't convince you, though.
Right, but even that you're saying the test isn't, did they claim to have seen risen Jesus? You're telling me that there was other tests.
There were tests that you could not pass unless you were a true apostle. So there was something miraculous or something supernatural about the tests that were going on there beyond just some type of
outside of Matthias, no one's test. Outside of Matthias, no one's test is that they saw a risen Jesus. That's what I'm saying. Like you're trying to conflate those two things. I feel like you're trying to conflate those two things.
Well, I definitely think that Acts is early enough to be able to say that that's a real test there.
No, but I'm even giving you that. I'm even saying, even in Acts, only Matthias is explicitly said that the test was that they saw risen Jesus. After that, the tests are other things. And right. I'm also, Matthias is chosen, so let me, Peter, I'm just trying to, does Acts 1 even use the word apostle? I guess I can do a search here.
It's down after.
Oh, yeah. So 12. Yeah. The apostles returned to Jerusalem. So, all I'm saying further
down. Look at verse number 25, that he may take part in this ministry and apostleship. So
Yeah,
they
but
give
so I'm
you, they say
granting,
this is what they need in order, this is what they
but
need
later
to have
on,
been in order to be an apostle.
right? But no one in after that needs that test. That's all I'm saying. Is even in Acts, no one after that needs that test.
Where do you get that from? Where that's kind of an argument from silence.
Well, because you're specifically saying they're giving other tests. They're giving tests of the of well, first of all, Paul was not present
But
with the Lord, right? Like,
that doesn't mean that they stopped giving
so they
this
hold on.
test.
They called Paul. So in when they replaced Matthias, I'm just checking here to make sure I'm correct. The criteria was what that they had to have seen they had to have lived with the Lord, right? Did Paul live with Jesus?
No,
So they changed the criteria at some point.
I think that's a real solid point. My argument for that is really flaky, and I would not want to.
Okay, all right.
It's
Now,
pretty weak.
sorry if I'm
My
going
my
heated on this.
argument is that he's and no,
Yeah.
just that there's a he marks himself out as a different type of apostle, and that's pretty weak.
So
So
I
well,
love being pedantic on this because it really actually hones whether I'm onto something or not. And so if you, I was very open to you to so I'm sorry if I get excited. I just love geeking out on this stuff, and I realize we are now in a very esoteric conversation that may not engage the audience very well. But I appreciate that you are willing to that we gave each other some ground. I think, and that you at least see where I'm coming from. That what you're putting forth isn't convincing to me that apostle is synonymous with saw risen Jesus.
okay, all right. Thanks for the
Cool.
conversation. Had a really good time. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes.
Cool. Thank you, Wes.
I'm
I
sorry,
was
everyone,
enjoying that.
if that got weird
That
and detailed and
I love how you said, "I'm sorry if I got a little heated there." I did no heat whatsoever. Like that was a calm, cool conversation. I enjoyed it because it's very
all right.
reminiscent of your other videos where you dive into the nitty gritty of, like we touched a bunch of stuff there. We talked about the Pauline epistles. Like there's ones that are generally accepted by scholars, and there's ones that are rejected as forgeries. With Acts of the Apostles, like who wrote it? Are these reliable tales? When it comes to the Gospels, which we didn't really touch much on that, but the what's the synoptic problem, like how can we determine whether these are independent sources or they're dependent sources? What lines of evidence we have? Like that's kind of stuff like I love watching on your channel. So I was super duper engaged. That's why I was staying out of the way for the most part. But Shannon just said Paul got heated in Canadian. I don't know. I like if that was heated in Canadian, I just don't know anymore. So but no, that was great.
Well,
Any closing thoughts on that
no,
for
you
Wes?
wrapped it up well. I guess the reason I just in case the audience missed it, the reason why that's important is because, of course, if you're willing to say if you're willing to grant this vague version of the word apostle to lots of different people, like the 500 people that Wes wanted to add it to, then all of a sudden some of these martyrdoms can come into play because we really only so it's one of these like chess piece type things. Well, he's trying to set up a later move to be able to say that people died for this because the evidence we have for the people who are named in the gospel dying is really weak. So, but I
Yep.
loved that conversation, Wes. Thank you so much. And if you care about minimal witnesses, I wrote an article on Bart Ehrman's blog that you can go read.
Very cool. Yeah, that's an interesting thing is that Christian apologists tend to overextend when it comes to the number of martyrs, individuals who actually died for their faith back in the day. And yeah, if you increase the pool of apostles, you can increase the pool of martyrs. So you can kind of see the benefits of being able to
Right.
establish that type of line of reasoning. But as you just pointed out, apostle is very ill-defined in the Bible. We have conflicting information. Paul doesn't fit the previous definition of an apostle because Paul didn't actually witness Jesus outside of a vision. And it's
Right.
then, once you get into vision territory, like, okay, let's say hypothetically, Jesus actually did exist. He actually did have apostles. He actually did die and resurrect, and Paul hallucinated it. Like Paul wasn't actually part of Jesus' plan, but he suffered hallucination or he suffered some type of psychotic break from just the pressure of persecuting Christians. And he imagined his whole thing and he managed to insert himself into Christian society off of that delusion. Like that's a possibility. Sure, it might be a 1% possibility or 2% or whatever, but it's there. Like it's something that can't be discounted. So Paul coming in there and saying, "Hey, I'm an apostle." Like, okay, well, hold on. This kind of like really shakes things up a little bit because who is this guy coming out of nowhere?
Right.
Sure, the other apostles were like, he wasn't even with us during all those trials and tribulations, following Jesus, undergoing the nightmarish few nights of Jesus, up leading up to Jesus's execution. So yeah, you can imagine all kinds of like drama. Somebody should probably write a TV show about that. Like the last like 3 days of Jesus' life, and just the drama between the apostles. That would be a fun watch. Cool. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about announcements again. So we have multiple shows coming up on this week on the line. I've already mentioned most of them, but we have shows just about every day: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. None on Friday, none on Saturday, and then we have 2 shows on Sunday. And what you can do is you can subscribe to the Line YouTube channel. Go to the live tab. So go to the channel, go to the live tab, and you can see upcoming shows once they are posted and ready to go. But for next Sunday, repeat of this show, we're going to have the Sunday show with Matt Dillahunty and Jimmy Snow at 2 o'clock on Central Time. And then we're going to have After Dark encore show, I guess you can call it, with Aaron Raw and Aaron Adair. So yeah, come back and go ahead and watch those. And I don't know if we have any other like major announcements. I'm sure Arden will post them. I'm sorry, Arden will post them in the chat once she wants to give them to us. So let's just go into more calls. Next one we got in line is we have Harper, they, them from California.